So we're back with another episode of the One Pour Problems podcast. Today I am joined by Brett Greene, the head coach at Willington Nameplate. We'll get into exactly why he goes by head coach.
Yep.
I love the story behind that, but super excited to have you on the show today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into why head coach, I'm more interested at this very moment as why you picked Margaritas to be the drink of choice today on the show.
So I've dabbled off and on with hard liquor over time, and I've definitely just kind of honed in on this margarita because it's good for all occasions, good for all weather patterns, which, as you know, we get through all the seasons here.
Yep.
So it's just a good mix. It's a little bit sweet, but not too sweet. And I guess, honestly, I'm a little sissy with the super hard stuff, so it's perfect for me.
I love it. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Appreciate you coming on today.
Same here. Thank you.
And this one is a little spicy too. So good. It's a good one today. So, again, head coach.
Head coach.
Give me a little bit behind, why go as head coach when the alternative could be, I don't know, CEO.
Yeah.
Right? So why?
It's definitely strategic. I look at my role is to educate, coach, train, provide resources, call the plays, just provide direction to my team, right? And let them do their thing. That's what they get paid. They're the players. They got to execute the plays. So my job as the head coach just to bring that all together and give them the tools to be successful by also staying off to the sideline while they play the game.
Yeah.
So I kind of call it, I'm not a Patriots fan by any means, but my Belichick principle, right? That guy, he's the ultimate head coach. He just gets stuff done. He's not the best personality, so I don't jive with him in that way, but he puts his play, he gets players, the right players to fit his style of play, and he puts them in the best position to succeed, and that's why he's one of the best ever.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I love the fact that you're actually living that thought process, right? Because I know we had a few emails going back and forth, and I saw head coach, and at first I was like, there's got to be a story here.
Yeah.
But even having it in the email signature, again, it speaks to how you lead in the organization. So I'm assuming then there's some sports background in your world that led you to head coach.
Yeah, a lot of sports, plenty of football, plenty of basketball, hockey. You name it, I'd like to play it. So yeah.
Anything now?
No, I'm falling apart now. Now it's just trying to maintain and stay on top of things.
So no
it's
water
mostly
aerobics?
No, just mostly hiking, walking, and working out. I have a morning routine. I've been doing it forever. I'm like 4:30, 5 o'clock guy. I get up, do my thing. And nowadays, since COVID, it's all in my house. I've put together a whole little setup there that I can pretty much do everything nowadays. And the days of looking like Hulk Hogan are long gone. So I'm just trying to maintain what I have and make sure my wife stays happy with how I look. So that's all I can do.
That's it. And for those listening, we're going to make sure that we go try to find a Hulk Hogan-looking photo of Brett. So it's got to be somewhere on the internet, I'm assuming, at this point.
Not on the internet. It's probably in my closet. You can't have it.
That's awesome. So excited to kind of talk about your background today because, one, it is a very interesting story to where you are today. It also resonates with me personally, both of us having accounting backgrounds and then jumping into finance and now stepping into more operations focused in that type of world. So talk to me a little bit about that journey and kind of what led you to where you are today.
Okay. So I went to the University of Connecticut, so go Huskies.
There you go.
Graduated there in 95 with an accounting degree. And so I remember in the business school, and they had their postings back in the day. Everything today is digital, but they would have the postings up on the wall. And there was a posting for financial analyst, I believe it was, at Hamilton Standard at the time. All right, well, within my major, so let's go for it.
Good.
So I submitted it, and I ended up getting that as my first job. So there I was, went to Hamilton Standard. My dad had an idea. I didn't even really know much about Hamilton Standard.
Yeah.
Again, being a clueless 17 or 18-year-old at the time. But obviously I got there and I started doing my research and homework and learning about it, and like, oh, wow, this is a gigantic company. It's part of United Technologies. So as I found out where I worked in Space and Sea, it was by the rest of the aerospace, which was 90% of probably Hamilton Standard at the time, it was called the Country Club. I'm like, why is it called the Country Club? And I really don't know why it was called the Country Club, because I guess they felt that they worked a lot harder and on the cooler stuff. But we made a lot of systems that went on the space shuttle. Mm-hmm. They made a lot of components for the space suit, not to mention stuff for submarines back then. Really cool. And quick story there, too, is they had a miniature of the spacesuit at Hamilton Standard, and you could take it out on weekends and, like, borrow it. Literally, you rent it. You didn't have to pay for it.
Wow.
You sign your name, and yeah, you want it? Okay. So my girlfriend at the time was a teacher, and she was, third or fourth grade, and I said, do you want me to get you the suit? So I got her the suit, and it was the best thing ever for her class. The kids were in their glory, and I returned it the next day. But it literally was a miniature model. I was about 3 or 4 feet high. It had all the gadgets and stuff on it. Really cool.
That's the way to get the brownie points.
Yeah. So that was my foray in the finance and getting involved, and obviously starting right out with a big company, right? You don't really get, especially for us around here, you don't get too much bigger than United Technologies.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Huh. And so, you left school with an accounting degree, stepped into finance. Did you ever expect to be where you are today based off of where you started?
No, I would have anticipated I'd still be crunching numbers somewhere.
Yeah.
On a green ledger, probably still. But
But
I've always been flexible. It's not like I had this dream of like just being a bean counter.
Yeah.
If anything, actually going back to school, when I first started out, my mom thought it would be a good idea if I went into pharmaceuticals. I said, okay. And I got to school, and there was this super intelligent individual. He was a sophomore, junior at the time, was in the School of Pharmacy, struggling his tushy off. And I said, Mom, I don't think that's for me. So what's a good plan B? I like math. I'm good with numbers. Okay, so this is the path we want. So that's how I did the accounting degree.
So ironically, I had a similar story as far as like my background in accounting, because I graduated in high school and was like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to swim in college. So like that was my major like decision of what I wanted to do. And then I was like, okay, also being like, I've always been like financially minded. And I was like, I had the choice to go to Roger Williams or go to Southern Connecticut. Southern Connecticut got a scholarship. Roger Williams, much smaller scholarship. One was $50,000 to go to college. The other one was $20,000. And I was like, at that point, I was like, I'm going to pay for it myself. So what's the right thing to do? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to Southern. And when I got there, I was like, what are the majors that, can potentially help me earn the most money? And outside of like nursing and going to be a doctor and like that kind of stuff at Southern, which had great programs for that, it was like accounting. And I was like, I like numbers. I could probably do that. And I did fine in the classes and all that kind of stuff. But, I never really was like, I like the finance side or the accounting side. What drew me was the auditing side. And specifically, I found out that a lot of like FBI agents are auditors. Like that's their background.
Yes.
And so they can do like financial crime and that kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, that's cool. That was a short-lived dream. Never really made it that far. Got to the auditors of public accounts at the state and was auditing state agencies, which was cool, but not nearly as cool as breaking down doors and, financial crimes. So
it's funny you say that, because that was a path I was considering as well. Once I knew I was going down the accounting, was being like a forensic guy, right? And whether it be the FBI, or CIA, DEA, whatever it was. But yeah, the reality of that set in pretty quick. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Sounds cool though, right?
Yeah. Yep. But I guess the interesting part for me now, and curious to hear your thoughts on it, is I think I'm able to do the things that I do today because of the fact that I had that accounting background. Would you say it's the same for you?
Yeah, I've told a million people now that I am where I'm at, and how I got here is like, you can be an accountant and do everything else, but you cannot do everything else and then try and be an accountant, right? You need all those core education tools, then you need the real world tools to figure it all out, because there's a science behind it all, right? It's not just addition and subtraction.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to it, but yeah, if you don't have the core fundamentals accounting things, it's not something you're going to be doing later in life.
Yep.
Whereas we have that, we can do everything, right? You've gotten to where you are with that as a baseline, and I've been able to do my thing with that baseline as well, and I definitely wouldn't change that. Being in a business and having to worry about and understand all those concepts, because you do get a lot of presidents, CEOs, whatever, that are more maybe those engineer types, and they don't know numbers from boo. They understand the numbers, but they don't know where they really come from and how they're can be manipulated and how they can be tweaked and adjusted and all that. So it's good to have all that background. So I'm sure you feel the same way.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely makes that a lot easier, because I think you can go find those people to step into those engineering type roles and that kind of stuff that are specialized into that. But you have the ability to understand how all those things tie together. And I think that's definitely been like the biggest benefit that I've seen throughout my time at Charles IT in particular. Yeah. So how did you end up in the role that you're in now? Like, talk about the decision-making process that led you to Willington Nameplate.
I don't know if it was so much a decision was made for me. So I started out at Hamilton, worked there for about 5 years, went to Pratt. It was kind of like an internal transfer under the United Technologies umbrella, which was really cool. Now I was really into the aerospace stuff, obviously, because that's a big time what they do there. So I went to work for a supplier, AMK Welding it was at the time. It's no longer called that anymore. In South Windsor. It's a welding company, obviously. I went there as the operations manager, and that was fun. So now I'm learning welding. Like, whoever thought that Brett was going to learn welding? Yeah. Yep. And so it's like, here I am learning all this stuff, but just got to be curious and learn from the guys on the front line. So I did that, and I ended up becoming the president there after about a year, and then after that, not after that, after about another year, it was a publicly traded company, and there was a lot of turmoil, things I wasn't doing right in my first gig as a president, and things I inherited. But it's a publicly traded company, so you got to worry about the bigger picture. And even though they liked me and I was doing a good job, it wasn't what they needed. So they fired me. That's the only time I've been fired in my career, and I was fortunate, because if I wasn't fired, I wouldn't have had this opportunity at Willington Nameplate. So how I got to Willington Nameplate is the owner. It was second generation co-ownership, brother and sister. The brother I would always see in the gym in the mornings when I was going to the gym before COVID, and he used to always poke at me. Hey, Brett, come work for me. And I was working at the welding place, and I got a good gig. I'm good. Thank you. So then I had this come up where I did get let go. So I let that stew for about a week, and I said, all right, let me talk to a gentleman. His name was Mike. I said, Mike, I'm ready to come work for you. His jaw hit the floor, even though he'd been talking about it for however long, and it was on his mind. He wasn't prepared for it, right? So I went and I met with him at the actual facility and checked it out. So now you've gone from these big, $1 organizations to a little small family-run business.
That's a good financial term.
Yeah, about 70 employees, 40,000 square foot facility. You could walk around it in 5 minutes versus going a mile and a half to get around one of the campuses. Yep. But as soon as I got there, I felt a very good vibe from the organization. It was a good culture. The people were working hard, probably actually too hard. They were going crazy, running around this place, getting nameplates and labels ready for everybody. So I got a really good feel from that, and I already had a good feel from Mike. I met his sister, and then some of the other key players. And this was a big deal for them, because this was now going outside the family to get someone to help out in the business. His father would have never done that, but Mike was second generation. He was much more strategic, and he knew that if they truly wanted to grow the company, they had to do a little more and look outside the walls. And so I started there, and he kind of gave me the reins and just said, go. Because he trusted me and he knew what my background was. But I had to learn, so I did the same thing, right? I did my own onboarding like the first month. I just went from person to person and worked with them, tried to understand what they're doing, why they're doing things. Not changing anything, obviously. That's the worst thing you could do. And I think that's how I kind of built the trust right out the gate. And it's funny. Mike used to tell me, he goes, "You learned this business the quickest out of anybody." Really, I did, and I guess now if I look back, I did pick it up pretty quickly. Everyone always they always thought you had to have been in the business to figure things out. But if you're curious enough, right, and you're engaged and motivated, that's all it takes. And if you work with the people, you can absorb it, and they were just willing to show you.
Yeah.
So that was really what drew me. Side benefit, it was only about 4 miles from my house, so commute, great,
nice.
Right? Jackpot. And that's where I've been ever since. So, and then I went to general manager, so kind of took over. That was my first step in a kind of more of a global role for the business. And then I became president about 8 or 10 years ago. They kind of gave me the reins and been doing it ever since.
Yep. No, it's quite the story. And there's honestly, there's a ton of threads to pull to continue to walk through that. And I think for me, something that we haven't talked about on the show that I'm really interested in hearing your perspective on is you were at that previous company and they had a direction that they wanted to go that didn't align with where they thought you were going, and ended up having you lose that job, but then having the fortitude to be like within a week, like what's next? Where am I going to go? I think a lot of leaders initially, if they're not from an entrepreneurial background, right, they're getting to where they are because they're winning, right? They're winners, and they continue to keep knocking it out of the park, right? And sounds like from your background, that's what you were doing, right? And for better or for worse, that one stop didn't sound like that was exactly winning,
right?
But you were able to take that and then quickly pivot into this. How'd you do that? Because I feel like that, I'm just thinking about it from my own perspective of how I would feel if that all of a sudden happened to me. It's a really impressive.
Well, I have a good trait and a bad trait, right? Of kind of being having ADHD is I like to stay busy. But sometimes I also get distracted very quickly, right? So, I mean, I was already after a week or two, I was like, I'm not just going to sit here. I don't care that I'm getting, whatever severance, however long that lasts. It's to me, the trigger was, well, the sooner I get a job, that severance becomes a bonus, right? And I can go to other things. So that's where my finance accounting mind says, I could trick this. And and I did I was not eager to sit idle and look for that golden opportunity. If anything, I feel like it kind of came to me. And that was one of the things I guess I did want to talk about. It's not always about you finding your right fit. To me, I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. As a matter of fact, just on my ride here, my daughter texted me. She's all upset. She's looking for a summer internship, and she had gotten with one company, and we got through 4 rounds of interviews, but she just found out today, right? She didn't get it. So coaching even my daughter, right? I would do the same thing with my employees. I do the same thing to myself. It's things happen for a reason, so you can't dwell on them too much, but you just got to look for it. Okay, so where's the light at the end of the tunnel from what happened here? And that's what I did with that. So I had to reflect a little bit. I agreed with why they had to do what they had to do. And I wasn't put in a position to be successful. I wasn't going to be. But I still tried to just take what I can learn from that. Yeah. How can I apply that to my next role? And one of the key things was certainly being more aggressive, and especially when it comes to personnel. I love giving people chances. I love working with people. But sometimes you're right, you can get to the boiling point where you've given somebody too many chances and you've lost sight of how they can impact the team, right? You get, not that they're cancers per se, but they have a major effect or an impact on the team. So that was definitely a key thing from that role, is being more aggressive with personnel. And then also just like the strategic components and, finding the right people on the bus. My boy Collins in that book, one of my favorite books of all time, making sure they're, you got the right people on the bus and that they're in the right seats too, right? Just because they're a great team player and a good cultural fit to your company doesn't mean you have them in the right spot or that they're actually good for your company.
Yep.
We've had a few of those people too, right? They're wonderful people. They got a solid core, but they didn't just have the right skills to grow with the company.
Yeah.
And those are hard decisions, right? Because those are good people, usually hard workers. But it's a business, right? The great thing about the family business is I'm not tied to making decisions based on a stock price or shareholders, right? Yes, I have the family that ultimately I report to, but that's not what drives them. That drives them is being successful, making sure the employees are taken care of, and that the company maintains its good name out in the marketplace. And that's a much better position than, for me anyway, to be in. And I prefer it much more than, saying, I run a $1 billion company. Yep. I think this is more my niche, is being the big fish in the small pond.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool to like have the perspective to like say I went from big companies, been in small companies, and now I know what I want and I know where I best fit, because I think that's half the battle, right? When you're looking to like make your mark in an organization, knowing whether or not it is like who you see yourself being and the things that you want to do. Like I think that's a huge decision that a lot of people don't often think about enough when they're making that decision, or even get the chance to make, right? And I think it's just, again, it's really cool perspective, especially coming out of what you came out of, right? And you didn't dwell on that, and you went back after, and you're like, this is where something brought me here, and now it's turned out to be, sounds like exactly kind of the thing that you were looking for.
Yeah.
So,
honestly,
really cool.
I think everything's kind of brought me to that point. So your earlier question, that would you envision this not in a million years, but I don't think I'd change very much.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you were talking about was the transition away from did you ever think Brett was going to be, doing welding?
Yeah.
I think that is one of the most important characteristics of a leader that I think I've picked up on a ton of throughout these conversations that I've been having with other business leaders, is being able to actually step into the shoes of the people that you lead. And not only does it help you from a understanding what they do and being able to run the business, Brett actually, he's done this. He understands. He's actually, done some welding. He understands what this is like, or how to do the blueprint.
Sure. I took my welding stick and stuck it right to the piece of metal, and I don't think I did it correctly.
No one said you had to be. As far as making a career change, I think that's one of the other things that I want to, get your perspective on, because being somebody who is financially focused, I have to also say that making a career change is one of the scariest things, right? Because you're I'm already on this path. I have some stability in knowing what I'm going to do and where I'm going. And then, can you actually jump into, be this general manager and completely step out of your comfort zone where you're no longer, worried about the actual books of the business as your standalone responsibility. Now you're also talking about operations and the other things. And it doesn't have to be specific to operations, but, talk to me a little bit about stepping outside of the comfort zone of this is the path I know is going to be on. Instead, I'm making a pivot, in this direction.
Yeah. So it's kind of inherent in most probably bean counters and, financial type people that were type A personalities, right? So for the most part, not everybody, but for the most part, right? So you're pretty rigid, you're pretty structured. And certainly I definitely, and, right up there with the best of them. And I remember, getting that job at Hamilton and even working at Pratt. My dad would always say, "Oh, that's great. You're at these companies. You could work there for the rest of your life, right?" I'm like, oh,
heard that
okay,
before.
if that's the expectation, I mean, I know that's what people do. But I guess I'm glad I didn't really feed into that, and I just always kind of wanted to challenge myself to do more, do better, learn, make more money, right? I mean, that's what it's all about, and be happy. I can honestly say, this job I have has made me the most happy and given me the most enjoyment. I look forward to going to work every day. One of the things is if people are sitting home on Sunday and racking their brain about going to work, you got to question yourself if that's the right job for you. Because if it's not, it's okay. It could just be a stepping stone to something else. But so that's what I've always, I guess, tried to do along the way, especially as I've matured a little bit and gotten a little bit more knowledge with things. It's just, take it as it comes, and some things are out of your control, right? Yep. Focus on the things that you can control. And as I've gotten wiser is, make sure you're happy, right? And thankfully, this is definitely made me happy, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, are just afraid of the change.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you see it in, like, even if we take out business, right? Like, some people might just be afraid of changing their relationship, right? And they're like, I might not be happy, but, like, I'm comfortable and I know what I'm dealing with, and, like, you don't want to make the change. And I think even for me, when I left the state to come to Charles IT, it was funny. I got a little bit of goosebumps when you were like, my dad said, you got the job, you could stay there forever. I'm like, wow. Like, I'm listening to my dad say the same thing to me, right? He's like, you work for the state. Like, you're good, man. You're going to have a pension, and 40 years from now it's going to be amazing. I'm like, 40 years? I'm like, God damn. Yeah. But, you have that same thought of stability, and the change is what's scary, because, it's the unknown. It's uncomfortable. It's where, you're not exactly familiar. And I think that's also some of the part you have to think about. Like, the sitting at home on Sunday, like, that was my same thing. It was like, if you're dreading that drive into work every day, maybe you don't get to dread it that much if you're only 4 miles away. But
right.
If you're dreading that ride to work, that should be a sign, right? It should be a sign of, like, if I'm not excited to be there, and, like, yes, a lot of people don't, they don't live to work. Everybody says that we work to live, but if you're enjoying what you're doing, you don't look at it in that way.
Right.
And I think understanding that is probably one of, like, the key things that I'm taking from what you said. Is, like, you need to make sure that what you're doing you enjoy, because then it doesn't feel like work at the end of the day.
Yeah. We spend whatever portion of our lives, right, working versus other stuff. And, when it boils down to it, you got to make the decisions that are in your best interest and for your family. And sometimes it takes some risk, right? And you got to get outside your comfort zone and find that. And some people can do it, some people can't. Like, I definitely would. I'm a pretty risk-averse person. So being like an entrepreneur, got a lot of good ideas, but I would never take that step off the cliff. I'm just I'm not wired like that.
Yeah.
But fortunately, Marcel, who started this company, he did.
Yep.
In his story, he was 26 years old, 3 kids, not a pot to tinkle in.
Yep.
But he said, hey, I got to make this for me. That was in his best interest and his family. And lots of years of struggles, but he persevered, and look where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And
he had it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Could not have done that.
But I think there's a tremendous need for people that think that way, but also people that also understand that that's not them.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And maybe you aren't the person that, has the ability or the, the cojones to go out on a limb and do that, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, you're still taking chances and risks for yourself. And those entrepreneurs, more times than not, visionaries, right?
Yes.
They great ideas, awesome, like, vision for the future, but piss poor execution and ability to make those things happen. And I think that's where, it's okay that, not everybody is is made for that thought
That's
process.
right. That's right. Because you also see it on the flip side, right? People think they're entrepreneurs and they have an idea, but they have no like business acumen and things like that. And unfortunately, they may have a good idea, but it just fails because they don't know how to go about executing it. So,
Yeah. And I think recognizing is one of the best places.
Yeah.
And I know in my world, right, in the IT services space, they say often that, anybody with, a laptop and a car can be an IT service provider, right? The trunk slammer IT, is what they call it, because you're like, I'm technical and I can go service and help people. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the vision to be able to figure out like how you're going to sustain that long term and grow that and be able to scale, it also doesn't work out in that same thing. And you see IT guys fail pretty often at it because very like technical and, process driven off of like the solution, but they don't understand like how to turn that into like a business. And I think that's one of the interesting things about understanding like who you are when you're making those decisions.
Yep.
But I would say, thinking back to you making that career change where you were like, okay, I'm in the accounting role and the finance role, and then now I'm going to move over into something that is more operations focused. If I'm hesitant to make that move, why, what advice do you have for me to go and do that?
So I was fortunate. So again, that plant manager had been through that, right? And I deemed him to be very successful. He was the best boss I've ever had, and definitely my best mentor. So he was a role model for all things that. And at that point, I was aspiring to continue to climb the ladder, so to speak, in my leadership roles. So I guess I looked at that as a footprint, and I trusted him and his judgment, and he again felt comfortable with what he was doing, and knowing that I would be supported, and I would have him as someone as a crutch, so to speak, I can go to and ask questions, and I was confident in the organization and what they were doing. So, but being risk averse, I was thinking through, and I stewed on it for quite a bit before I made that decision, and I'm glad I did. My wife helped encourage me, right? So it's always good to talk it through with other people and not just deal with your vantage point, people you trust, and growing networks as we've become more successful are super important. So you can always have people you can reach out to with, I'll call it an unbiased opinion, right? And help out there. So definitely you don't want to be shy. And these days I'm not, so it's easy to ask just about anybody those questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. I guess to piggyback off of that, like now that you've been through it, right? Yep. You said that your mentor had been through it. Now you've been through it. Is there anything that if you look back, you're like, I wish I would have done this differently, or I would have made, a different decision at this point because of X, Y, and Z?
Well, like I said, everything happens for a reason. So I got to where I got based on those things. But the biggest learning things was the personnel and being more aggressive on that front. Strategy execution and carrying through on your strategy and making sure it's well communicated and conveyed. And that's always an ongoing challenge. So that's been a learning, and how to do it. And it's, I want to say you'd think it would be easier at the smaller company, but in some ways it's almost harder because you don't have the same amount of resources that are constantly reinforcing or challenging, the strategic objectives, so to speak. So just constant communication there and getting people aligned on your vision and what it means to, for down the road, and not just looking past, not just focusing on today or even tomorrow, but, what does next week look like? What does a month look like? What does a year look like? That's hard for smaller companies, right? Because it's just not at the forefront. You're worried about your survival day to day. So it's harder for people to look in that long range planning. So just really not too much. Just I've learned every step of the way, and if you really truly want to be a leader, you've got to listen. Obviously, anywhere you go about a leadership, right? You got to be a good listener, And listening has definitely, my listening skills has gotten better. My wife would not agree with that, but my listening skills have gotten better. I tell her I use up all my listening skills at work, so that's why I have a hard time at home.
Yeah.
She doesn't buy it, but
I can resonate with that.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And just communication and learning, and make sure you're understanding your team from all aspects, what they deal with outside of work, inside of work, so that you can kind of connect all the dots to make sure you're giving them the best chance to be successful.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I love where you went at the end of that, where you mentioned like having, understanding what they're kind of going through at all those certain points, because I know we talked about it before, is like understanding their job, right? Like what they do, super important as a leader. Understanding like how to continue to progress the business, super important as a leader. But also like understanding like what they're dealing with like in their world personally is also very important as a leader, because sometimes you might be pushing and they might not be at the place where they can push right now because of whatever those factors are, and it's really important for you to know like what is happening in that person's life at that time, to be able to help. And it doesn't mean that you have to completely change the way that you are operating or anything like that, but there is something to be said about like understanding like what people are going through, to be able to give them some of that empathy and be able to help. Is that something that you see yourself doing a lot more now that you're in a smaller business than when you were what was it, cow with a tag on the ear?
Yes, herding cattle.
Yeah, herding cattle.
Yeah, without a doubt. You get it's good and bad, right? You get really attached to your teammates, and you learn about them and their families, and so when it does come, if you have to make a hard decision on somebody, it's it weighs on you a lot. But I always have to remind myself that I have to make decisions that's in the best interest of the overall company.
Yep.
So you gotta, as much as I am more involved at a personal level, with my level of experience these days, I can also back away from that to know that hey, this is what needs to be done, and but I wouldn't change it. I know it's I got to know how they're feeling, what they're dealing with, so that I can know how to best position them. Yeah. And mentor them and coach them and put them in the right roles, right? All those factors tie in. Even some of them, right? They're here they have greater aspirations. They do have a plan, and Willington might just be a pit stop on the way to that end journey, and we're still going to make the most of it and coach them for their success for the future. I have no problem if people are willing to coach people that I know won't be long-term employees, right? Yeah. Because you got to get the most out of them while they're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, you've given me some great perspective so far, on the show. Is there anything in particular that you would want to give as advice to somebody who might be going down the similar path that you went on, right? Like where you're like, I'm accounting based, finance background, I'm going to go down this route. Any advice on, what you would say to somebody who, may think that they're going to go down that path and stay on that path, or somebody who might be considering a change?
Well, I think it's healthy for any individual to challenge yourself, right? And so I think you have to kind of look within. The starting point, like we said, is to determine, are you happy in what you're doing? And if you're not, you don't have to make a rash decision, but think through, well, what would make you happy? Kind of build a plan. And I know not everyone's great at planning, but it doesn't have to be anything super complex or complicated. What do you like to do? And try and filter down and figure out where that path might take you. Ask some questions, right? Network with people. Because you don't have to jump into anything these days. And plus today, right, you could do research on just about anything to get a sense of what's out there, what's not out there, what are the benefits, what type of companies are doing what. When I was younger, you didn't have that. It was called an encyclopedia. If it wasn't in there, what else did you have? Yep. So yeah, just don't be risk averse and challenge yourself to put yourself in the best position that you feel will make you fairly happy. I wouldn't say the happiest, because that's ideal state. Not everybody gets there, but if you can get pretty close, right, that's what you should shoot for. And don't just let the world come to you. So you got to be aggressive and go out there and experience the world.
Yep, absolutely. No, I appreciate the perspective, and again, appreciate you coming on today. It was a great episode. Learned a lot in the time that you've been here, and excited to have everybody else, pick up something from the episode. So
appreciate the time, and love talking about leadership, the business, all things, whatever. So thanks for the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, it's the last part of our episodes. We do have the fun ending where we challenge everybody to a typing test.
Oh.
And so we are going to put you to the test here.
Oh, boy.
To see where you might.
Last time I was typing, it was a long time ago.
Good luck. Just don't DQ.
Where am I?
All right, this is not a good place to start. Let's hit the refresh button so nobody knows.
The magic of television. We can start over.
Yeah, you're gonna want to start this one over. You were destined for.
So much for putting it in a stable environment. Show your test results. -18.
Our sponsor.
That's where we need a sponsor.
44. That's weak.
That's good.
Hey, you did pretty well compared to most of the people in this thing.